Here we go. Starting with the second parak, Baruch Hashem, page Yud Gimel Amud Bet 13b. And here we go. Ve'elu mutarin. And these are mutar. These are allowed. Meaning, the statements that you make are by saying, this piece of meat is going to be like this. The halacha is that it's allowed to still eat it. So here's a list of them. We saw some already in the past dapim. You got it there? So, one of them, so the Mishnah starts, chulin she'ochelecha. Number one is, this is going to be like chulin. It's going to be like non-korban, regular food. So my piece of meat is going to be like chulin. So that's for sure mutar. It's just you're comparing it to food that's allowed. Kebasar chazir, like pig. And it's amazing, like you would think that's you're comparing it to the most asur thing. But it's just that, as we learned in the laws of, you got it? In the laws of Nedarim, you can almost bet. 10th page. Yeah, there we go. Second case is, you would think, I'm comparing my piece of meat to chazir. You would think, okay, now you can't eat your meat. But we learned the rule, this is where it comes from, that you could only in Nedarim make something asur if you compare it to something else that was made asur through a neder. So chazir is asur intrinsically, and therefore your piece of meat is still going to be edible. The next case, avodat kochavim, like avodah zara. So that also is intrinsically asur, and therefore we're going to see the run about this. And therefore, it is, so all these cases are intrinsically asur, and therefore it is going to be allowed for you to eat your piece of meat. Ke'orot levuvin, like the skin of the heart. So here, the case is, these are items served to avodah zarah. So, good morning. So we're just starting the new parak, and the new parak is talking about a list of things that are allowed. Meaning, when I say my kosher piece of meat, I wanted to compare it to this. So the halacha is going to be that it's allowed for you to eat your piece of meat. And we said chazir. I want this to be like this piece of chazir. So we said it's still allowed for you to eat your meat because this is asur intrinsically, and you can only make things asur if the item that you're comparing it to is asur through a neder also. So if you say avodah zara, it's also your piece of meat is going to remain kosher. The next case is ke'orot levuvin, like the skins of heart, and this is basically what they would do to serve things to their avodah zara. They would take a live animal, and this is like ever minachai to the maximum. They would take a live animal and basically like poke its heart out through stick something into, like jab a thing into the body of this animal and rip the heart out, and obviously the animal will die like that. But while it was alive, it did that, and they would serve that heart to their avodah zarah. So I'm not sure what.
Like eating a live animal. If you rip a limb from an animal and you eat it, it's like eating a live animal. Is that right?
Well, it's ever minachai. It's limb from a live animal. Meaning, in addition for being asur because you didn't do shchita, it's the violation of ever minachai. Yeah. So, but this is how the goyim would. One of the ways that they would serve their avodah zarah was this type of method, and therefore, let's say you say, I want my kosher so'obi's piece of meat to be compared to be like that heart that they would serve to their avodah zarah. Your piece of meat would still be kosher. So, because something that's served to avodah zarah is also like the status of avodah zarah, and we'll see a little bit in the run about this. Kenevelot utrefot. So a nevela and a trefa. So a nevela is a let's say kosher animal like a cow, but it died on its own. not through shchita or whatever, that on its own, that's a nevela. A trefa is you did a shchita, but then you found that it was not kosher. It had a hole in its lung, etc. So that's terefa. So those are also non-kosher, not non-kosher animals from the start, but they're non-kosher from the start that you're able to see, can I eat this meat or not? It's not kosher. So meaning it only becomes kosher once you do a shechita and a bedika, and you check that the animal is kosher on the inside, then it's good. So if you compare it to a nevela or a terefa, then your meat is still able to eat. You can't compare it to these other ones. Kishkatzim or ramasim, these are creepy crawlers, insects, rodents that are asur from the Torah. So it's also like chazir. Kechalat Aharon uktrumato, like the chala of Aharon, which is referring to chala that you give to the Kohanim. We learned about this already. So chala is also asur for us to eat, goes to the Kohen, and truma. Truma is also, we said, it starts off as every grain in Israel starts off as tevel and unedible halachically. Once I take off my truma and maaser, then I can eat it. But that truma still remains unedible to me, and only allowed to a kohen. So if you compare your piece of meat or your bread to any of these, then it's going to be mutar. Then it's going to be allowed. Okay, let's pause here. Let's take a look at the Ran. Kebasar chazir, on the right side. First word of the line is kebasar. Kebasar chazir, kavodat kochavim. Okay. It says the Ran, kol mine asurim ktani. All different types of things that are asur. That's what it says here in the Mishnah. Asurin ba'achila, things that are asur to eat. Kebasar chazir, like chazir. Va'asurin b'hana'ah, things that are asur to benefit from. Kavodat kochavim. Kavodat kochavim, like idol worship, meaning I'm comparing my piece of meat to idol worship. Well, idol worship, you don't eat an idol, but you can't benefit from it. So what you're saying is you don't want to benefit from your piece of meat, and as opposed to chazir, it's you can't eat it. And here too, I want to compare my meat not to be able to eat it. So kavasar chazir v'asurin b'hana'ah kavodat kochavim v'asurin b'hana'ah she'en lahem batala, and things that are asur b'hana'ah that are not batel, that you cannot get rid of, keorot levuvin, like these hearts, she'ayu tikrovet la'avodat kochavim, that they were served to avodah zarah, she'ayu nokavim ba'or keneget halev, they would put a hole into the skin opposite the lev, opposite the heart, v'ayu motzinot, and they would take out the heart, kishu chai, when the animal's alive. V'chamiri avodat kochavim, it's more stringent than actual idol worship. Denehid avodat kochavim it lebatala. Avodat zara has batala. You could get rid of its. I'll explain in a moment. Tikrovet avodat kochavim en lebatala. So I'm not so familiar with the laws of avodat zara, but it sounds like, with a little bit of research, that avodat zara, if it could become batel, like if you have an idol that started off as gold and was made into an avodah zarah, it could be that you could get rid of avodah zarah. You could turn that idol back into a piece of gold. It doesn't look like an idol anymore, or whatever, and it could lose its shem avodah zarah. Whereas something that was offered to avodah zarah, it's already done. That was offered to avodah zarah, and like there's nothing like you put it in front of it. You serve avodah zarah through this heart, through this whatever. It seems that that's been served. You can't do anything. You can't change it. So it sounds like it's interesting that the thing that you serve the avodah zarah with, it becomes more stringent than the actual avodah zarah. Okay, back to the Mishnah. Haomer leishto. A person says to his wife, Hare alai ke'ima, you are like my mother. So what he's saying is, in a neder form, I want you to be like my mother. And just like a person's mother he's not allowed to be with, so too what he wants to say is, I don't want to be with you like I can't be with my mother. So so that also is asur intrinsically for a person to go with his mother. So therefore, it's not going to work. But potchin lo petach mimakom acher. But we open up for this person a opening from somewhere else. Shelo yakel rosho lekach. So he's not going to be. Let's see. So he's not going to be lightheaded with this. Meaning, we don't tell him right away. Oh, what you said is nothing. So move on with your life, because we don't want people to talk like this. We don't want people to think that it was so lenient what they said. So we make for him an opening from somewhere else, so that so he shouldn't be lightheaded with saying these type of things.
What does that mean when he says lightheaded, though?
That he's not going to cheapen his words. So, the rabbi right away. Oh, it's okay for me to say something like this. Okay, so I'll say other things like this. I think there is more of a explanation there. What else does it say over there? The comments. And I think there's more to it. Yeah, in order to impress upon the vow or the gravity of his declaration.
Yeah,
right? The rabbis required him to seek annulment from a sage or a panel of 3 laymen. Meaning, so even though you compare it to Chazir, right away someone that learns the Gemara could say, oh, Chazir, it's fine, you can eat your meat. So here as well, compared to mother, okay, you could, it's fine. It could be like that, but we don't want the vower to feel like it was, what he said was, oh, okay, fine, it's light what I said. So make him go in front of 3 people, or make him go in front of a rabbi, to like you do for Nedarim. Okay.
Yeah, I think the second paragraph is the point. Like,
Well,
the rabbis
imposes
imposes requirement on
ignorant men in order to discourage them from rashly declaring Nedarim against their wives, since this could lead to their actually rendering their wives forbidden to them. Yes, that was another pshat. Yeah, because they'll say this. They'll say so it's so light against my wife to say things. I'll maybe say something else that might actually stick.
Yeah.
Okay. Gemara. So we're now discussing the first case, which is chulin shechel. Like we're comparing my coach piece of meat. I say this meat is like chulin, is like regular non-korban food, which is mutar. Says the Gemara, Ta'ama de'amar chulin she'ochel lecha. The reason why it's allowed is because you said chulin she'ochel lecha. Ha'amar la chulin she'ochel lecha. This is already, we said this a couple times. But if you say la chulin, if you compare la chulin, this is like la chulin, mashma lo lechulin. La chulin is lo lechulin. Lehave ela korban. So really what you're saying is, if I want to say, this piece of meat is la chulin she'ochel lecha. So la chulin is really lo chulin, is not chulin. Not chulin is korban. So now you're comparing it to a korban, it's going to be asur. So, says the Gemara, Mani Matnitin, who is the author of our Mishnah? There's no author. Who is the author? Says the Gemara, Rabbi Meir. If you want to say it's Rabbi Meir, Hadlet le michla lavat hashomeahen. Rabbi Meir is not of the opinion of inferring things. So when I infer no, you hear yes, meaning we said over here la chulin shochel lecha. Not chulin, I'm eating. I'm comparing this not to chulin. Not to chulin means korban, but that's an inference. So an inference Rabbi Meir doesn't go with when it comes to nedarim, and therefore it's still going to be mutar your meat. So therefore our Mishnah is not like Rabbi Yehuda, not like Rabbi Meir. The Gemara, ve'ela Rabbi Yehuda. Rather, it is like Rabbi Yehuda. It's not like Rabbi Meir. It's like Rabbi Yehuda. Okay, so now asks the Gemara, Hainu Reisha. Says the Gemara, Hainu Reisha. The Gemara's question is, it's the same as as the beginning, which is referring to. The Mishnah in the last parak said straight, Chulin shachel lecha is mutar. Where's that Mishnah?
Maybe Yud Aleph,
Yud Aleph.
like 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
I have a question.
Well, it says 10b.
A Yudam bet. Yeah, 10b, yeah. So, we're saying lachulin shachel lecha is asur lachulin. But I guess chulin would be allowed. That's what we're comparing to? Yeah, Hainu Reisha. So the Gemara is asking a question. Hold on, this was earlier, meaning we already said lachulin is asur, because we want to say who's our Mishnah? Rabbi Yehuda, because lachulin would be asur, chulin would be mutar. We already learned that earlier. Says the Gemara, Aidi dektani kebasar chazir kavodat kochavim leachi ktani chulin. Gemara is answering, we threw it in, meaning since we're teaching you here about chazir, comparing your kosher piece of meat to chazir, comparing your kosher meat to avodah zarah, we threw in also like chulin. So yes, we learned it earlier. We're not trying to teach something new with this. We're just throwing it in. Okay. Says the Gemara, Ravina says, Hachiktani. Now this is what's going on. This is what an explanation as to why it has to say chulin over here. Ravina Amar Hachiktani. This is what I meant to say. Ve'elu mutarin kechulin kebasar chazir ke'avodat kochavim. These are allowed. El mutarim. He adds in the chaf. When you see it, the others say kebasar chazir ke'avodat kochavim in our Mishnah, but it doesn't say kechulin. Here he adds in, you're comparing it like chulin. And what does that mean? Ve'il lo tana chulin hava amina ba'i she'ela. Ve'il lo tana chulin hava amina ba'i she'ela. If it would not have said chulin in the Mishnah, I would have thought that you could ask on it. To be honest, this piece was a little bit rough for me. I didn't get it clear. Till 2 dots, we'll get there, but it's a little choppy. So here he says it has to say kechulin. Vilo tanachulin havamina ba'i she'ela.
It not mentioned that it was chulin, I guess.
It says in the Quran, it says velo ba'i she'ela, so there shouldn't be a question. Mutar legamre velo ba'i she'ela.
כלומר, כאומר חולין שאוכל לך, שיהיה מותר לגמרי ולא באי שאלה.
To me, it says, and if it did not teach the case of non-sacred food, I would say that although the vow does not take effect, it still requires by rabbinic law request to halachic authority.
To dissolve, right? That's she'ela la neder. Ve'ilo tanachulin hava amina ba'i she'ela. Okay, so what Ravina is saying is kechulin is necessary because you might think that when I say this kosher piece of meat is like chazir, if it wouldn't say chulin, it's like chazir, it's like avodah zarah. The answer is mutar. You can now have it, but it might be mutar only after you go and do a she'ela on your neder, only after you go to a rabbi or in front of 3 people. But now that you compare it to chulin is totally allowed food. So we're saying everything in this list is like chulin as well. That this kosher piece of meat is like this kosher piece of meat. So you said nothing. So in that same category, that same list is this kosher piece of meat is like chazir. This kosher piece of meat is like avodah zarah. So you don't have to go ask any questions. You don't have to go to a rabbi to undo your neder. You don't have to get to Nedarim. It's like chulin. So that's what we needed chulin. And that's what the Gemara asks. Umi ika la'asuke al dati hachi. Al da'ata hachi, says the Gemara, would one think to do this? Would you think that when it says mutar, you need to go ask? Hamdiktani seifa, ha'omer le'ishto, hare at alai ke'ima, potchin lo petach mimakom acher, mi'echla deresha lo ba'i she'ela. Let's read that again. Hamdiktani seifa, since it says in the seifa, in the sof, in the latter part of the Mishnah, ha'omer le'ishto, hare at alai ke'ima, when a person says to his wife, you are like my mother, we open up an opening from somewhere else, meaning he has to go to ask a rabbi or go to three people to get it undone. That's in the Seifa case, in the case of the mother case of comparing his wife to the mother. Michlal deresha, you could deduce from there that in the beginning part of the Mishnah, lo ba'i she'ela, you don't need a she'ela. So Ravina, we're asking on Ravina. Ravina says, you're saying the reason why we need chulin over here is because if I didn't have chulin, you might think that you need to ask and go to do hatarai nedarim. If you compare your meat to chazir, you compare your meat to avodah zarah, you're going to need to, it's allowed, but you need to go to get it undone by three people, etc. So that's why we need chulin to say, no, it's mamash, it's allowed, like chulin is allowed. So the Gemara says, would you really think that? In the latter part of the Mishnah, it says straight out that if you're comparing your wife to your mother, there you need to go get it open from somewhere else. That means that the beginning part of the Mishnah, you don't. When it says mutar, it's mutar off the bat. You don't need to do anything else. And it says the Gemara, Ela, rather, mechavarta, it's clear, chulin memela nasva, that they brought in chulin, like, they just threw it in, because we want to just, it's just, we spoke about chulin earlier in Daf Yud Bet, and here's another list of things that are allowed when you compare your food to all these items. Chulin, we're going to throw it in there as well. So the Gemara remains as a question on Ravina's explanation and goes with the original explanation. Now the Gemara asks, Minahane mile, where do I know from in the pasuk? Where do I know this rule that if a neder only works on your allowed item to compare it to something that's not allowed, if that item that's not allowed became not allowed through a neder? Where do I know this from? And not that it came not allowed intrinsically, because it's chazir, because the Torah made it asur. So where do we know this from, that it can only come through a neder? Amar Kra, the pasuk says, Ish ki yidor neder la Hashem, a man that makes a promise to Hashem. Says the Gemara, what's this yidor neder? Ad she yidor bedavar hanadur, until you make a neder on something that was already a neder was made on. That's what the Gemara is learning. Yidor neder, ad she yidor bedavar hanadur. Says the Gemara, question. If so, if you want to learn from the pasuk that way, I feel bedavar asur nami. Even things that are intrinsically asur as well. It should also be, you should also compare your regular kosher food to something that's asur intrinsically. That should also work. Because the pasuk says le'esor isar anavsho, to make himself asur, and it sounds like something that's already asur on his soul. Le'esor isar anavsho. It should just say le'esor anavsho. Le'esor isar nafsho could be looked at as to make asur something that is already asur.
Oh, it's already asur.
So I know I'm taking this through my neder. I'm making something asur compared to something that's already asur.
The language is the same also. Yidor, neder,
right.
Isor.
Right. That's where the question's coming from. Yidor neder tells me a neder compared to something that's already a neder was on. So le'esor isar nafsho can maybe mean to make this asur. I could even connect it to something that's asur intrinsically. Answers the Gemara. Le'esor isar mibayale. No, I already need le'esor isar for a different drasha. It's already used for a different drasha. You can't use this drasha of comparing it to things that are intrinsically asur. It's already used for something else. What's it used for? The kedetani, like it says in the Braita, ezo isar ha'amur b'Torah. That we learned earlier. Ezo Isar Amur Torah, and Yud Bet Amud Aleph. It's reminding ourselves of that. Ezo Isar Amur Torah. What's the classic case of Isar? And the person says, Amar Hareni Shelo Ochel Basar Shelo Eshte Yain, Kiyom Shemet Bo Aviv, Kiyom Shemet Bo Rabo, Kiyom Sheneherag Bo Agedal Ben Achikam.
יום תענית.
Comparisons to that case, Ezo Isar Ha'amur B'Torah. What is the classic case? The Hareni Shelo Ochel Basar Shelo Eshte Yain, Kiyom Shemet Bo Aviv.
Maybe it's like תרומת לחמי תודה? I don't know. It's also on the same page.
What's the comparison there? Ezo Isar. Shmin Daf, I'm to tell you the Neder, Shalom Nezer, and you should go, oh, إلا هيكرا هذا منك يدور نادر عجيب بدورش أدور الجامعة شن إنسان بيقول أخذ وشو كذا ليش So the Gemara earlier says, what's the classic case? We're learning what's the classic case that you're comparing a neder to the day that your father passed or whatever. So we said the day that your father passed is
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning. The day that your father passed is that custom of, let's say, fasting on the day that a person's father passed. So you want to say, I don't want to eat like that day. So that's something that's personal to you, and that's not something intrinsically asur. So if it's something that's personal to you and not intrinsically asur, then it's something that came asur later, and that's like something that came asur through a neder. So, Ezo Isar Amuva Torah, the Gemara's, when it says the Esor Isar, we're using it to, what's the classic case of Isur when it comes to Nedarim, and the Gemara answers cases that are made Asur through you, like through Neder. So Gemara is answering that we've already learned the Esor Isar to talk about classic cases of Neder, when things are Asur to you, so we can't use it to mean something else. We've already used it for something.
So you can't, right?
So you can't use the Asur Isar to teach us you're comparing it to something that's Asur intrinsically. Is that what's in here? The phrase to forbid a prohibition is needed for that other exposition which was taught in the Braita. What is the formula for the neder prohibition mentioned in the Torah? I.e., how can a neder prohibition be invoked through association? One says, I hereby undertake that I will neither eat meat nor drink wine today, as on the day which my father died. He has invoked a neder, because of the day a person's father died, he can't eat meat or wine. So you've made a neder through association, comparing this to that.
Right.
And that comparison is a personal one, not intrinsically. The phrase to forbid a prohibition teaches that this type of neder is effective. Mm-hmm. And since to forbid a prohibition is needed for that exposition, we understand vows, a neder, as excluding a vow through association with something inherently prohibited. Because the comparison there is to something that is asur through you only. And the day a person's father passes doesn't mean that everyone can't eat meat or wine that day. gives a little bit understandable reasoning when you say, "Let my bread be like a piece of pork." It's meaningless because the pig was asur from the Torah intrinsically. How can you compare your piece of bread to that? That's asur intrinsically. So that's why, like, logically, why it doesn't work, right? Like, how can you compare that? The Torah said that that's asur. You want to say your kosher piece of bread is going to be like a piece of pig? Hashem said that's asur. Hashem didn't say that your thing's asur. But now when I say I want my piece of bread to be like that korban, so that korban, oh, that was made asur through a vow. Oh, now you're comparing it to that. It's just an interesting way of looking at it. A good way of looking at it. Okay, so we'll end over here, and basically the halacha is as the Mishnah is, and here the Ran brings as well, that you have to connect it to something that was asur through a neder, and things that were spoken about about your wife that you need another petach for. As we mentioned, not to be lenient, and not so that accidentally you'll say something that would actually render something asur against your wife. We will continue tomorrow night, Ezrat Hashem, and we will get to the Mishnah, or more, let's see, tomorrow night, Ezrat Hashem. Sorry for the later start.
Thank you very much, Rabbi.
Shavua tov, guys. Chazak u'baruch.